Have you ever wondered how the beautiful city of Chicago became what it is today with its nice skyline, tall buildings? Well, it became what it is today because of one man, and that man is Daniel Burnham. He was a man who created a plan called the Plan of Chicago. But who is Daniel Burnham? Daniel Burnham was an American architect and urban planner. He was a director of works for the World Columbian Composition in Chicago. He took a leading role in the creation of master plans for the development of a number of cities, including Chicago and downtown Washington, D.C. And in this plan that Daniel Burnham created, he did six things to it to make the city of Chicago what it is today. And those six things are: 1. The development of the lakefront that Chicago has today and will have for a long time. 2. The development and creation of Grand Park, in which many important events take place. 3. The improvement of railway terminals, including the CTA and Metro, in which hundreds of people use every day in Chicago to travel around the city. 4. The development of an outer park system and of parkway circuits all throughout Chicago. 5. The arrangement of streets and avenues within the city that are used every single day throughout the city of Chicago. And finally, 6. The development of centers of intellectual life and of civic administration, so related as to give coherence and unity to the city. But Daniel Burnham was not alone in creating the plan. He had the help of Edward Bennett, and the two of them created one of the greatest plans of all time in history to change the way a city looks. So now, instead of just calling it the Burnham Plan of Chicago, you can call it the Burnham and Bennett Plan of Chicago. So why am I doing the Plan of Chicago for my history fair? Well, it connects to the theme revolution, reaction, and reform. Because the Plan of Chicago was made to change Chicago economically and the way it looks. But the plan itself had a problem, so there was a reaction, and so a reform had to be made in the plan. So without that problem in the plan, Chicago could have looked a lot different today. But what's wrong with the plan? Even though Daniel Burnham's plan had all of these good things in it, he still has something missing. But what? This is what we'll figure out right now. The answer to our question is that the plan of Chicago was missing one thing, and that one thing was housing reform, which was one of the most important things that Chicago really needed back then. This should have been the most important part of the plan because the population of Chicago was 2,185,283 people by 1910. So the government took a survey and found that numerous families lived in one family home. That meant that there were too many people and not enough living space in the city of Chicago. So how did Daniel Burnham and Edward Bennett create the Plan of Chicago and not include housing reform in it, which was very important because of the population growth? Well, the creators of the plan only thought of looks for the city, when they should have thought of what would benefit the people and the city of Chicago at the same time, instead of just benefiting on the looks. The Plan of Chicago was already created, so the people did not know what to do to create more housing space. So then Daniel Burnham and Edward Bennett figured that there was only one thing that they could do, and that thing was to go up, which was the only place that had space to build bigger buildings for the people. So since the only way to create more living space is to go up, that meant that big buildings would need to be put in place of small buildings that were in the plan. So now that more buildings needed to be added to the plan, Daniel Burnham needed to design how the buildings would look and where he would put them in the city of Chicago. So after the reform was made to the plan, which was housing, it was pretty much perfect. And the plan led to the building of many famous places in Chicago, like the Sears Tower, or what is known as the Willis Tower, which is the third tallest building in the whole entire world. Also, it led to the building of other famous places on Chicago's lakefront, like Soldier Field, which is the home of the great Chicago Bears of Chicago. Also, the Field Museum was put on the lakefront for many people to see the history of the world and other places in this country. Even a planetarium was put in place where people could be able to see how the space is. And the last thing on the lakefront that was created because of the plan was the Shed Aquarium of Chicago, in which there are many sea animals that can be visited all year round. So overall, if there wasn't a mistake in the plan of Chicago, there wouldn't have needed to be a reform, and the city of Chicago would not look how it is today. So now that you know how the city of Chicago became the greatest city that you live in now, and since you know the history of Chicago now and how the beautiful places came to be, you should spend some time to visit them, just like the famous bean of Chicago.